this Leviathan wasn't created overnight. There's a lot of people that have a vested interest in keeping the administrative state this powerful, and when you go out to try to defang it, they're going to come after you. So if you have someone serving as Attorney General, that's somebody that needs backbone. That's somebody that needs to be willing to stand in the fire, because the fire is coming the minute you start to issue and institute reforms. I'm going to call on people around the country to answer a call of service. Pick up your family for 2, 4, 6, 8 years. Come to Washington, D.C., because really the future of constitutional government depends on it. This bureaucracy has been imposing its will on us for far too long. It's about time we impose our will on it. And we'll be doing so much more on so many other issues, and we'll be happy to have those discussions with folks in New Hampshire and across the country over the ensuing weeks and months. But here's the thing. None of this stuff we talk about is going to matter one bit if you don't win. There is no substitute for victory. We have to dispense with this culture of losing that's enveloped our parties in recent years. I look at this debt deal, and I wonder, we should have 55 Republican senators instead of only 49 Republican senators. A lot of those were winnable races. A lot of those were flubbed. And so maybe the deal would have been good if we had 55 Republican senators, but we don't. We have 49. So there's not going to be any mulligans on this one in the 2024 election. We either get it right or we suffer the consequences. And make no mistake, the Democrats are playing for keeps. If they win and sweep the 2024 election, they are going to try to pack the U.S. Supreme Court. They are going to try to eliminate the Electoral College. They are going to try to make Washington, D.C. a state. And they are going to try to eliminate voter ID in every jurisdiction in this country and mandate that all states allow ballot harvesting during elections. Now, that is not an agenda that is speaking to the needs of the typical American family. They're worried about food prices and gas and crime and education. It's an agenda where they're trying to render people that don't agree with them to be second-class citizens, to lock you out of having meaningful voice in your government's affairs. And so the stakes are high. And President Reagan used to say freedom's one generation away from extinction. It's not passed along in the bloodstream. And I used to think, yeah, that may be a little bit of hyperbole because, we're Americans. Isn't freedom just in our DNA? But if you've lived through the last 4 or 5 years in this country, we've seen firsthand how fragile freedom really is. It is not our birthright. It's something that we have to fight for.
Yes, ma'am. Well, did you just see the Iowa polls that just came out? I mean, we can talk about polls all day long. I mean, I think that you've seen some great stuff. I can tell you. When you run in these things, you run and you persuade people. I mean, that's the whole point of it. Like, you don't do a poll a year out and say that that's how the election runs out. I mean, if that were the case, I wouldn't have been elected in the first place as governor. And even my reelection, I had people saying we were going to win by a couple of percentage points. We won by 20 percentage points. And so we're really excited about the enthusiasm we've generated. I think you're going to see a lot of really good stuff over the ensuing weeks and months, but that's kind of separate from what we're doing here, which is, in my role as governor, I have a responsibility to be a leader, and we're going to be working with the sheriffs in a more formal way going forward, and we'll put out more information about that alliance. But I think that we have a lot of like-minded governors, we have a lot of like-minded sheriffs around the country who really care about public safety, who really care about the rule of law, and who want to have borders that are enforced in this country. And so that's the direction that we need to go. And I think that the more that we can do and show that where the federal government has abdicated its responsibility, we're stepping up to make a difference. One, I think that that's good in of itself, but it's also at some point, if you're the federal government, wouldn't you want to be taking this on? I mean, it's kind of embarrassing, I would think, to have all this activity happening to try to fill the void, fill the void that you've left. But there have been a lot of governors that have sent down to Texas now. It's not just Florida that sent people. You've got a number of states that have done it. So this is a team effort. At the end of the day, we're all Americans. This is not just a crisis that's limited to border states or border counties. It's an issue that affects Americans of all walks of life in every community here, and we need to get it to where we're not consoling mothers on a routine basis who've lost kids because of overdosing from fentanyl. I mean, we really got to do something about it. It's been gut punches for communities throughout this country. It's forever changed families, and enough is enough. And so we're here to do something about it. So we look forward to seeing some stuff on the border, and we're here to help, obviously, and we want to continue to be engaged with all of you with our new coalition going forward. Thank you.
And he did again last night. Regardless of his attacks, will you 100% pledge to support Trump as the GOP nominee?
So what I would say is this. When you are saying that Cuomo did better on COVID than Florida did, you are revealing yourself to just be full of it. Nobody believes that. And you know why? And you know why I know that? Because I remember in 2020 and 2021 when he was praising Florida for being open, saying we did it much better than New York and Michigan, and everyone was coming to Florida, and that we were one of the great governors in the United States. And he used to say that all the time. Now, all of a sudden, his tune is changing. And I would just tell people, do you find it credible? Do you honestly find it credible? Would you have rather been in New York during COVID under Cuomo regime, or would you rather have been in the free state of Florida? And I probably can count the number of Republicans on my hand in the nation who would have rather been under Cuomo in New York, and we know that. And so these are just frivolous criticisms, but in some respects, I think it shows that if you have to make that argument, then you probably don't have very good arguments, because the reality is everything he said about us for years, about how strong we were, how good we were, how we've delivered for the state, those happen to be true. And now he's trying to backtrack because he views he needs to do that, and he's saying things that are false. And so that's fine if you want to do it. I don't think people are going to buy it. I don't think it's going to ultimately matter in the end. I think we're going to be successful. But at the same time, you get into these processes, it's like, I want to beat Biden, okay? I will do that. I will get that done. And I think more importantly than that, I will actually bring these policies for a landing and get it all done up there. It's one thing to promise things, but when you don't deliver on it, then it's like, okay, then they get in, and then they get to do stuff by the time they get in. So we'll do it. But it's a important process. And, you respect the process and you respect the people's decisions, how this goes. But I'm very confident that those decisions are going to be positive for us. Back there.
Thank you, Governor. Aaron Navarro, CBS News. On energy, where do you stand now when it comes to bans on fracking and offshore drilling?
So I don't support national. I think in Florida, people have kind of misconstrued. We have a constitutional amendment that does not allow offshore drilling, and so that's something that we honor. And so when we're doing that, that is not saying that I think that should apply to Louisiana or Texas and all that. So that will continue, and we want them to be able to do it. And we also want them to be able to use hydraulic fracturing. It's been something that's been very effective, and it's really taken our country to be the world's leading energy producer. But clearly in states like Florida, because we're a coastal state, we've had oil spills, we've put that in the Constitution, our voters did, and that's something as governor that I've followed and respected. Yes, ma'am.
Lisa Kaczynski from Politico. Governor, your spokesperson said online that MAGA grandmothers were scammed out of money by Trump to pay his legal bills. Could you expand on that, please?
I'm not familiar with that, but at the end of the day, we're here to talk about restoring this economy. We're here to talk about uplifting the middle class. To me, if you ask voters, are they more interested in hearing about that or the process stories about politics? I think that they want to hear about the country's future, and so that's what we're going to do. Michael.
Thank you. Meg Kennard, AP. Meg.
Hey, Governor, thanks for taking the time. To piggyback somewhat off of Mayant's question, you're campaigning in a state where former President Donald Trump has maintained high levels of popularity and support, but also this campaign is happening as he is now repeatedly indicted by several jurisdictions, twice DOJ now. You've voiced criticism of those investigations, but as we've seen, as this cycle has repeated, the former president benefits from fundraising as well as polling numbers. Frankly, every time an indictment comes down, how does that situation, also given the fact that there may be a fourth indictment coming in Georgia soon, how does that further complicate specifically your campaign here? All of those circumstances, plus given, the two native candidates that we have in South Carolina.
Well, I think it's a great question. Well, first, I will end the weaponization of government. IRS, DOJ, FBI. You'll have a new FBI director day one. You will see the DOJ. We will clean house. We will be actively holding those agencies accountable. We will be taking power out of D.C. And parceling it out in other parts of the country, and that'll be something we do on day one. And so we see problems, and the Trump obviously gets most of the attention, but we've seen observant Catholics be targeted by the FBI. We've seen pro-life activists like Mark Houck have a SWAT team go to his house. We saw parents surveilled by the FBI going to school board meetings in Northern Virginia. And so this is clearly, these agencies have lost their way. They have not been held accountable, and I will bring that type of accountability. And I think that's the fundamental question for our voters is, okay, what are we going to do about this? Are we going to actually drain the swamp? Or are we just going to be talking about draining the swamp? And I think the former president had promised to drain the swamp, but if you look at the results, he did not make a dent in the swamp. In fact, he didn't fire Christopher Wray. He elevated Fauci and didn't fire him. He put General Milley in defense to lead the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Jerome Powell to the Fed, and so many other things. And so, we will handle that in a way that will actually bring fundamental change to Washington. And then I think the second point is, this election should be a referendum on the failures of Joe Biden and our positive vision to get America on a better path. And so we show how we're going to reverse the decline of this country. And that's what I represent. If the election becomes about the past, if it becomes about what happened 3 or 4 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, if it's about, this document or that document, well, Biden's going to be able to be in the basement again. He's going to be able to fly under the radar. And I think he's going to be able to get away with it again. And we're going to end up saying, what happened? How come, we can't win these elections? And so let's keep it focused on Biden and his failures and how we're going to do better for the American people. And if that is the case, we're going to do very, very well, not just with the presidency, but also expanding our majorities in the House and retaking the U.S. Senate. Anything short of that is just going to be inadequate for us to turn this country around. Well, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. We enjoyed being in New Hampshire. We were there over a 4-day swing, the end of July, beginning of August. We were able to cover a lot of ground. We did house parties. We did a town hall with WMUR. We made a lot of other stops. And we're going to be back in New Hampshire Friday night and all day Saturday, and then really pick up the pace with what we're going to be doing in New Hampshire, particularly after Labor Day. I think that there's going to be more attention paid to the primary once people settle back in after the summer. And so you're going to see an awful lot of us. We've been doing a lot in Iowa as well, and we're very proud of the progress that we've made there. We visited 38 of the 99 counties in Iowa, and we will do all 99 there. And we're going to get in every corner of New Hampshire, whether it's meet and greets, house parties, town hall meetings, all those things over these next 6 months. And we look forward to being able to do that and answer questions, tell people our vision about what's going on. I also want to say that, I disagree with Donald Trump's attacks on Governor Chris Sununu.
I think New Hampshire is the best governed state in New England. I think Chris has done a great job up there, and you can see where the fact that people flee to New Hampshire just like people flee to Florida, whether it's to escape crime, high taxes, you name it. So those guys have done a good job up in New Hampshire as the live free or die state. And as Republicans, we should be supporting Republican governors, whether it's Kim Reynolds in Iowa or Chris Sununu in New Hampshire, when they can get elected with big victories and then deliver. So just as a fellow governor, I appreciate that very much.
We led with purpose, we led with boldness, and we delivered results for the people of this state. The result of all of that was election of 2022. We had this thing won when Miami-Dade came in. We didn't have a deficit in Miami-Dade and Palm Beach. We won both of them for the first time in decades. Yeah, we did pretty good up here too, which was a lot of fun. But we were able to win, by almost 20 points, winning independents by almost 18 points. And what that shows you is if we are doing what we need to do, if we are delivering results for people, we will get people that have never voted Republican to vote for us. That's what we did in Florida, and that's how you win big. So that's what we need to do nationally. It hasn't been working for Republicans in most parts of this country lately. We've been losing a lot of winnable races because we're not attracting people beyond some of our own party members, and that's not good enough. You need independents. Look, I think we're going to be able to win some Democrats with given how Biden's doing and how bad everything is. We're going to be able to get it done, but you got to be able to track that. So we will do it. And here's the thing. I'm not going to give Biden any rest. We are going to run all around this country. We are not going to stop. We are going to show energy. We're going to show vigor. And we're going to show a great contrast to the American people between somebody that should not be in office anymore versus somebody that's going to spit nails on day one and get the job done for you. The other thing is okay, you got to win, and we haven't done that very well outside of Florida and a couple other states. You got to win. I think we can win big, but then you actually got to follow through on what you said you're going to do. And I can tell you of every, people that run for office, what they do, and that's Republicans and Democrats, they overpromise and they underdeliver. And that's been true for my entire life, and I would challenge you to show me anybody with the present company excluded who can show otherwise. What we did in Florida, we made bold commitments. Every commitment we made, we delivered on. In fact, we not only honored our promises, we over-delivered on our promises. Isn't that what you should expect from people who you put in office? So we're going to get that done, and that means on day one. And how do you know? Because we've done it here in the state of Florida. If you look at what we've been able to accomplish, these are things that Republicans have been asking for years and years and years. I mentioned we've paid down almost 25% of our debt. We did almost $2.8 billion in tax relief for you guys. Our Freedom Summer holiday is still going on. Sports equipment, events, all that stuff. You guys got it. Families with young kids. We made all baby items permanently tax-free so you can raise kids and make ends meet. We've done a lot. We did the toll relief. We did the rebate in the tolls. Some of you pay the tolls going over the bridge. So we did all that we could do to help people cope with Biden inflation, and we're proud of that. We also banned sanctuary cities in this state. We're cracking down on human trafficking and them smuggling illegals from the southern border into the state of Florida. And we even were able to provide a lift to some illegal aliens to beautiful Martha's Vineyard. The elites, they want to impose their policies on you and on me, and they want to have open borders. Until they have to deal with the consequences of open borders, now none of them want to deal with it. So we did that. We also did a Parents' Bill of Rights to make sure that parents are in charge of their kids' education. We just enacted universal school choice, so you guys can send your kid to the school of your choice. And we made sure our school system is about educating our kids, not indoctrinating our kids. We got rid of critical race theory. We got rid of gender ideology. And we even had to stare down Disney to do it. But you know what? When our kids are at stake, as the father of a 6'5" and a 3-year-old, I don't care how big of a corporation you are. I don't care how powerful you are in this state. I am standing for our kids, and I will not back down from that.
And so all the things we promised we would do, we've delivered. And even, look, I mean, it's not even my promises. I'll do others. So on Sunday, Donald Trump was in Iowa, and he was talking about his famous 2016 promise, build the wall and have Mexico pay for it. And I was very supportive of that back then. I think we need a wall. I think it's a good policy. And what he said was, because it obviously didn't happen, he's like, look, he's like, you know, people say this, but there was never any mechanism that I could use, legal mechanism, to get Mexico to pay for the wall. I can't just ask them for money and demand they give me money. Now, that's not what he said in 2016, but that's what he said. And he's like, so, you know, you just can't do it. But here's the thing. That's wrong to say, because if you really believe that, you shouldn't have said it in 2016 in every campaign promise. But it's also not true. You can get Mexico to pay for the wall doing this, not asking them to give you money. What you do is you impose fees on the remittances that people send back to Mexico from the United States. That's billions of dollars we can do to be able to do it. So not only do I keep my promises, I'm going to keep other people's promises. So I will have Mexico pay for the border wall, and we will get that done. So it's important that you do what you say you're going to do and that you follow through and deliver, because I think what you're seeing in Washington now, I see a lot of bluster. I see a lot of fanfare. I see people posturing. What results are they actually producing that are making your life better? Zero. And I can say, point to Florida and show a bunch of different things that we do to make people freer and to make people's lives better. And that's the type of leadership we need in Washington, D.C. You need to be able to get the job done. And we did even more stuff than that. But I think the point is anything I tell you I'm going to do, you can take it to the bank. When I get into office, I'm going to follow through. I don't make hollow promises. And I'm even going to follow through on other people's promises. So I don't know if you saw on Sunday, Donald Trump was given a speech in Iowa, and he started talking about his promise in 2016, and we all remember it. I loved it. He was going to build the wall and have Mexico pay for the wall. Probably the most famous political promise in modern history, certainly one of the top promises. And he would get lampooned by the media at the time, like, oh, you don't really mean it. He'd go out and say, no, I mean it, all this stuff, and you have all the clips and everything. And obviously that didn't happen. We know that didn't happen. But he was there, and he said, look, he's like, these people are getting on me about that. But there was never any legal mechanism where I could make Mexico pay for the wall. It wasn't possible to make Mexico pay for the wall. And he starts saying all this. I'm like, wait a minute. You said that for years, and now you're saying that you never intended to do it, that it was there. But here's the even worse part. If you know how to use power and you know how to lead, you actually can get Mexico to pay for the wall. No, they're not just going to give you money if you put out your hand. And so I will make Mexico pay for the wall by doing this. We are going to charge a fee on all remittances that are sent from the United States to Mexico or any of these other countries. It'll be billions of dollars, and we will use it to build the wall. I will get it done. So, you know, when you do 100% of your own promises, you can fulfill other people's promises too. So we are going to do that. You can take it to the bank. The remittances are going to pay for the wall, and we'll get it done where he was not able to do it. But I think that the issue is, and then so all of that happened, and you know, everything I did in Florida, people were saying, oh, you can't do that, you can't do that. The media is going to get mad at you, the left's going to get mad at you, and of course they did.
You know, we got to, as Republicans, stop worrying about what the media says about us. They're not going to like us no matter what. We got to stop worrying about what the left is going to say about us. They're going to go after us no matter what. And so if I did my job based on trying to avoid them coming after me, I would be paralyzed. I wouldn't be able to do anything. They have a spasm every time I get out of bed in the morning. That's just the nature of it. So you got to lead. You got to understand that doing what's right, if you're telling the truth, that cuts through all the BS out there, and people want to see leadership and they want to see the truth. And the proof of that is when I ran for re-election.
Former President Trump was critical of Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday. What do you make of those comments? And having yourself been to Israel and met with Netanyahu, what do you make of his leadership, especially in this moment of crisis?
Now is not the time to be attacking our ally. Prime Minister Netanyahu is somebody that I've become friends with. He is managing one of the most difficult situations Israel's ever had to face. You may have a personal vendetta or beef with him, but is that really the time to be out there doing that and to be attacking the Israeli defense minister? I don't think so. So we're standing behind Israel. We want them to be able to defend themselves, and we want them to be successful in this conflict. But you're not going to find me throwing verbal grenades at the Israeli leadership. It's easy to kind of do that. You can always second guess people, but that's not what we need now. What we need is to come together, and we need to win a victory. We need Israel to win the victory, and we will be supporting their right to do so. Okay.
Well, look, I would say, I think that if you look at what's happened with D.C. Republicans, they worked very closely. Look, Donald Trump, he supported Kevin McCarthy very strongly for Speaker. I don't think he would have won the Speaker vote. Donald Trump was instrumental in him earning that Speaker's gavel, and they worked hand in glove, really, throughout his whole presidency. They were on the same team on every major spending bill that came down the pike, and they ended up together adding $7.8 trillion to our national debt. Never in a 4-year period has that much been added than what they did together. And so he said that we're different. We are different because in Florida, we run budget surpluses. We've paid down almost 25% of our state's debt just since I've been governor. All the debt, all the way up for all of Florida's history, we've knocked off almost 25% of it. So it's a much different approach to where we're doing it right. We have the #1 rated economy in the country. We've cut taxes, we've expanded school choice, and we've delivered in a way that has made the state sustainable. I am not somebody who the D.C. establishment wants to see up there. There's no question about that, because they know that a lot of things will be changing if I'm there. And look, I would just also point out that we in Florida have a right to expect that they get some stuff done for us like they said they would when they campaigned, because Florida was instrumental in them even having the majority to begin with. This was supposed to be a big red wave in 2022. You had probably the most favorable conditions that Republicans have had in a midterm election since 1946. People were expecting a massive tsunami because inflation was terrible, Biden's unpopular, all the problems that we've seen. Nobody's happy with the direction of the country, and that's tailor-made for the opposition party to be able to sweep into Washington, D.C. Instead, the reason they even got the majority is because the governor candidate in New York overperformed, and because we delivered a red tsunami in Florida that gave them an extra 4 seats. That's the story of the midterm. If you take that out, the Democrats would have held on to the House of Representatives. So Florida did its part. We showed how you can win, and we want to see some results as a result of that. But I'm not somebody who's ever going to be the favorite of the D.C. establishment. You know what? I wear that as a badge of honor. Yes.
To handle the presidency age and the Supreme Court judges' age? Is there going to be a restrictive age level on either one of them?
Supreme Court justices?
And the presidency, vice presidency, and term limit. How are you going to say it for it? What are you going to do it?
Okay, a couple great questions. So you want to know, is there going to be an age I'm going to look for Supreme Court nominees and vice presidential nominee? And then the third is, how are you going to do the term limits? So the term limits is interesting. So Congress is never going to do this, right? Because they don't want to limit themselves. But founding fathers thought ahead. So they have an ability in the Constitution, Article 5, states can do an amendment and go around Congress. And so Florida's already certified this amendment for term limits. Other states. As president, I'll use the bully pulpit. I'll work with state legislatures to move those amendments forward. And you may do balanced budget amendment. There may be others that we're going to be able to do. But you're ultimately going to need to do that type of constitutional reform if you really want to hold Washington accountable. They are not going to discipline themselves. So we will put capital behind that. Now, in terms of the age issue for Supreme Court justices, look, Article 3 of the Constitution, they serve what the founders called good behavior, which basically means a lifetime appointment. They serve unless they retire, die, or impeached and removed from office. That's it. So when you're looking at a Supreme Court justice, if you put somebody in who's had a long and distinguished career, but they're in like their late 60s, well, their lifespan on the court is not going to be as long. If you put somebody on 50, they can serve 25, 30 years, probably. It's interesting, though, when they talk about replacing Supreme Court justices, once these justices get to be like 75, people are like, oh my gosh, they're going to retire, they're so old. Yet, we have people running for president that are in their late 70s and early 80s. What's a more difficult job? Sitting in your office writing opinions or being the doggone president of the United States? We need a president that's got vigor and energy and vitality. It's not a job for somebody that's 80 years old. Coming from Florida with all the great elderly that support me, we love them, but that is not a job for somebody that's 80 years old, and we're seeing it with Biden. But honestly, like, compare Trump to 16 to 23. Not the same guy. I mean, just doesn't have the zip on his fastball. And so we need 8 years to be able to get this done. We need somebody that's going to go, full bore the whole time, and I'll do that for sure. So... But on Supreme Court, you want to appoint somebody that is going to be able to have some longevity on the bench. And so if somebody is, there's probably a limit to where I'd say, you know what, you're not going to be on the bench long enough. So in Florida, I had the most liberal state Supreme Court when I became governor. We now have the most conservative because of my appointments in the country. And I think I appointed... most of probably the average age of the justices I've appointed has probably been in the early 40s. So they can serve till 75 in Florida as the retirement age. So, that's going to be a good court for a long time. In terms of the vice president, is there going to be an age? Obviously, somebody that is, in their late 70s, early 80s, I think that's too much. I don't know that there's a magic age for the vice president. I think the vice president is somebody that can be president without any question, that the minute you pick them, they can walk in and do the job. And then two, somebody that shares the values and the vision and the agenda. Because you vote for me, you expect those policies. If you put someone on the ticket who's going to diverge from those, that's not following the voters' will. So those are the two things I think are most important with respect to that issue. Yes?
As a former member of Congress, seeing how they're dysfunctional right now, where they don't have a leader, how does that affect your campaign?
Well, look, I think the contrast between what's going on in Washington, where it's high on political theater and low on results, is almost the complete opposite of what we've done in Florida, where we kind of speak softly but carry a big stick. We deliver big results. We don't do political empty calories. We're not out there doing things for fanfare. We're not trying to create any palace intrigue. We know there's certain things we have to do, and so we just deliver on that. That's what they need to be worried about in Washington. And so you have battles over leadership. It's happened before. The question is, if that's what's going to happen, what's the end goal? What's the result of that? How are we better off as a result of going through this? And what I see is, I see a bunch of people with like chickens with their head cut off. I don't see any direction here. I don't see any plan to be able to make the country better. And so if it's just about you creating a ruckus or you being able to get yourself in the limelight, that's not an appropriate reason to be doing some of this stuff. In Florida, I don't have any time for the entertainment part of governance. I don't have time for any of that. All I have time to do is to be able to focus on what do I have to get done? What did I promise to do? How do I bring that in for a landing? And that goes a lot of different things, legislatively, executive. We're coming kind of, hurricane. We had one hurricane earlier. We're always on guard in hurricane season for that. Ready to go if we have a storm. Ready to go if we have other contingencies that happen. And Washington, I think, is just the opposite of that. And it's not going to bode well for the party going forward if they don't get their act together. I mean, I think ultimately the most important thing for who controls the House and Senate will be who's the presidential nominee. Because if it's me, I think we'll be able to sweep in people like we did in Florida. I think if it's Donald Trump, I think you're going to see down ballot effects that are going to make holding the House very difficult.
Former President Trump had a different point of view. He criticized the Prime Minister being weak. He also mentioned a terrorist group as being very smart. My question really is temperament. How important is temperament when we look at a candidate for President of the United States?
Well, I think as a leader, you're in a situation, as governor it's been true, president even more so, the buck stops with you. You're going to have to make decisions that are significant. What are you bringing to bear in terms of those decisions? What's your foundation? How are you seeing these issues? And I think having a temperament that is agreeable is something that's very helpful. You don't want to be in a situation where you're making decisions because somebody personally slighted you and you're mad at that. No, the decisions are not about things people have done to you. Decisions are about how it's going to impact the people that you represent. So with respect to Bibi Netanyahu, Donald Trump is still mad that Bibi congratulated Biden with a tweet in November of 2020. And he's like, I'm never going to talk to him again, all this other stuff. So why bring that up when their nation is now at war and facing the worst attack that they've ever faced to try to have that dispute aired publicly? That is not how you treat an ally. It's not how I would treat an ally, but I think more importantly, broader for issues coming forward, I appointed people in Florida who were against me in the primary when I was running for governor in 2018, said he's not this, he's not that. That's kind of political season, but then I got to make a decision. If this is somebody that can do a job and do it well for the people of Florida, am I going to just let, my personal trump what's right for the people? No, I'm not going to do that. You've got to be bigger than a lot of this. You've got to look higher. A leader can't get dragged into the muck on all the stuff that happens in our society. You got to know there's true north out there. How do you get to true north? What are you trying to accomplish? All this other stuff, the drama, all the stuff, the circus atmosphere that politics has developed into, none of that is helpful for actually accomplishing what you need to do. So rise above that. Make clear-eyed decisions, and I do think that that's rooted. I mean, some people have temperament to do that. I think I'm somebody that does. I understand what happens in this business. I can predict what people are going to say before I even do certain things. It's just hardwired. That's just what it is. I chalk it all up to that's just politics. I don't let it get to me personally. I don't mind the attacks as much as I get them. Because I understand that just goes with the territory, but I'm not going to let that, even if I was bothered by it, I would not let that color my decisions when it comes to big issues. Those decisions are going to be made with synthesizing information. They're going to be good, solid, crisp decisions, but it's going to be about your best interests. It's not going to be about my issues.
Just a final question. One of your opponents, the former president, says the 2020 election was stolen from him. Do you agree?
Well, I've said many times, I said, if that is true, he was the sitting president of the United States, and let that happen to him. I would never let that happen. As governor, would I just sit there and let something like that happen? I mean, so on the one hand, you either say that, and then it's like, why didn't you do something about it? And if you didn't do something in 2020, how are you going to solve that problem as a private citizen rage tweeting from Mar-a-Lago. There's just no way. So I think it's an untenable position that he's taken. And I also think that view hurt our candidates in the 2022 election. When they were running on that, part of it is just you're looking to the past. Part of it is, you're indulging in this stuff. Now, I will say that because I was asked about this, I think I was on like Bill Maher's show, and I had to point out to him, Democrats said 16 was stolen. They said Russia stole the election. We had a massive investigation on Russia collusion, and there was no there at all. So I'm not going to sit here and say that Trump is unique in this. Hillary, I think to this day, says that the election was stolen for her. My pledge to the Republicans who are going to decide the nomination is, you nominate me, I will get the job done. I'm going to make sure we have whatever we need in place to be able to get the job done. I'm not going to make excuses. I don't like all the mail ballots going out when they don't even have accurate voter rolls. There's huge problems. We fixed it all in Florida, but there still persists. So do what you got to do to protect your folks, but don't whine about it. You got to go out there and you've got to make it happen.
I just want to say two things. One is, I think, Chris is right about retail being willing to answer questions. And what Donald Trump does now, he is wedded to the teleprompter. He can't get off that teleprompter. Anytime he does, he says things like, don't vote. He's telling people not to vote, like we have all the votes we need. Really? Like, wait a minute. You lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton in 2016. You don't have all the votes you need. And so I think that it's just shown this is a different Donald Trump than 2015 and 16. Lost the zip on his fastball, has a sense of entitlement, all this stuff, doesn't think he has to go through and earn it like other candidates. And that's just not going to fly in Iowa and New Hampshire. And that's why, how this came to be with Iowa and New Hampshire and on the way that I don't know, but I'll tell you, just having been here, I'm glad that it works this way because I do think you got to earn it. And I think the voters expect that. That's the first thing. Second thing is, I think Chris has said, and I've said, we need a candidate that can win the general election. There's too many people that just are not going to vote for Trump at this point, is my view, and I think Chris as well. But you have another wrinkle now with RFK Jr. as a third party. RFK Jr. will be a vessel for anti-lockdown and anti-Fauci voters if Trump is the nominee. If I'm the nominee, they all go to me because I stood up against Fauci. I'm going to clean out CDC and all those. It's a big part of my platform. With Trump, though, he created Fauci. He elevated Fauci. He never fired him. He said that he did everything right during COVID. He claims he saved 100 million lives, with the mRNA vaccine and all this stuff. And I think those voters who are understandably still very frustrated with how this federal government handled COVID and the lies that were told and all the mistakes that were made with no accountability, they're going to want a vessel for that. And I think they may default to Kenny. So I think he will hurt Trump way more than he would hurt any other candidates. And that makes it even a tougher uphill battle when you start talking about states like Georgia, when you start talking about states like Wisconsin and Arizona, Nevada. We need to put our best foot forward here. I will be the vessel for people that want accountability for COVID and the mistakes that were made.
Governor DeSantis.
Thanks so much. God bless you. Thank you for your service. Appreciate you. It's good to be here. We're excited about the progress going through this. We'll do one more county after today. It'll be new. It'll be 87 of 99, and we will finish all of Western Iowa throughout so far in the campaign. We'll be the only candidate to do all 99 counties, but you got to step up and you got to earn it. You got to go. You got to talk to people. You got to answer questions. So I'm happy to talk to you all here, and I'm glad to be able to be in Crawford County. So look, we've got a country to save. If you look at what's going on, we've got huge problems. The country's hit the skids in so many different ways, economically, culturally, and now we see all these security problems that are really rearing their head. And when the Hamas terrorists attacked Israel, one of the first things I started to think of is if they can get into Israel with the best border security in the world, what's happening at our own border? With all this thing how wide open, who's coming across our border? Of course, we know that there are terrorists that have come across. The government itself admits that there's been over 100, 200 people on the terrorist watch list, and that's just what they'll admit. We know people have come from Iran and Middle East and from China and Russia, all these different places. Just come right in, millions and millions of people, and we act like that this is not going to end up causing problems? Of course it is. It's a huge security risk to this country, and we're going to do something about it. I'm sick of hearing the talk about border. I've heard it a lot from Republicans for really a generation about saying that they're going to do it, and yet here we are, and the problem is as bad as ever. So with me as president on day one, we're going to declare it a national emergency. We're going to mobilize our resources, including our U.S. military, to be at the border to stop the invasion cold. When people come illegally, you send them back to their home country. You have to deport them back. And all these people that came in under Biden, from Iran, all these places, I'm sending them back immediately. We've got to get them back. We will build a wall. I think it's important, and we will actually have Mexico pay for the wall. Now, I know that's been said before, but the reality is, yeah, Mexico's not just going to fork over money. The way you get Mexico to pay for the wall is you impose fees on the remittances that people send back to Mexico and Central America, South America, who work in this country and are foreigners. You'll raise billions of dollars a year just for those fees, and you can do it to construct the big border wall. So we will get that done. We'll make sure. But more important than any of that, I think, is we have to understand the root cause of this problem is the Mexican drug cartels. We're going to treat them like foreign terrorist organizations. We're going to use deadly military force to hold them accountable because they're invading our country and they're killing tens of thousands of our fellow Americans with fentanyl pouring into communities. And this is happening all across the United States. And the thing is, and when you, as governor and then just as campaigning, you meet a lot of people who've been impacted by the fentanyl crisis. And the thing that you notice is fentanyl is a little bit different than some of the other drugs because oftentimes people that die from fentanyl are not necessarily addicted to drugs. They are sometimes, college kids who are stressed out studying for an exam. They buy a pill that they think is something other than what it is. Turns out if it's laced with fentanyl, they could die, and they do die. And all of a sudden, you have a mother that loses a child. We had a situation in Florida. There was a family with an 18-month-old baby that was crawling on the carpet of an Airbnb rental. There happened to be fentanyl residue on the carpet, and the baby died just from the residue. It's like, how is this acceptable in this country? And yet the elites in D.C., they don't do anything about this. They don't care about the issue. They're letting it happen. That stops when I become president. We are going to put this a day one issue. We're going to get it done. So we're happy to have done more stops here. Got a big day tomorrow. We're going to get up closer to 99 counties. I saw that Donald Trump did an interview where he said that he built the wall and had Mexico pay for it. And, at some point, the gaslighting is just so ridiculous. So a month ago, he was in Iowa saying, well, he didn't have Mexico pay for it because there was no legal mechanism he could have used to do it, even though in 2016 he was very clear he was going to have Mexico pay for the wall. I pointed out you can tax the remittances, which is what we'll do. That'll raise billions. You can do it. Then he said last week he only promised to have Mexico pay for a piece of the wall. You roll the tape at 2016. I don't remember just a piece. That's not what he said. So now he's saying he actually did it. But if he did it, we would not have 8 million illegal aliens coming into this country. The whole purpose of building a wall is so that you don't have this many people coming. So that is not accurate. That's like whizzing on my leg and telling me that it's raining. And we just can't accept that. We need results. And if you're saying you already did something you didn't do, then what does that mean going forward? So I'll get that job done, but we're not going to delude people and try to tell them that you did it when you didn't do it. You got to be honest with the people, and I think people are sick of the nonsense. Yes, ma'am.
So this is actually not specifically about the veterans event, but I noticed that you've been talking a little bit more about school choice, and particularly a federal school choice thing. Obviously, that's been a big deal here in Iowa politics. Can you tell us more about your plan for school choice at a national level?
So we'll roll out something concrete, but basically it's going to be modeled after part of what we've done in Florida. We have a tax credit scholarship program
so corporations can write off a certain amount of their tax liability. It goes to a scholarship granting institution, and then they issue the scholarships based on the criteria. So I think what we would do is we do it through the Treasury Department, do it through budget reconciliation. You would have a certain amount for scholarships. You'd set the criteria. But, you know, in Florida, we did 100,000 students for $1 billion a year, scholarship and administrative costs. So I think if you did like 25 billion, it could be revolutionary throughout this country. So we are going to do it. I think there's too many kids that don't have opportunities, and we want to make sure that we liberate them from a school system that may not be servicing their needs.
Governor, are you going to go to Vanderplaats's thing? If so, are you worried about any repercussions from that?
I'm going to be there at the Family Leader. I think it's an important part of this process. It's been a part of this process for a long time. There's no way that should cause the RNC to penalize any candidate. And so I was at the Family Leader today, did a podcast with Bob. I told them, you know, I don't know what you guys are going to do to work it out, but I'll be here no matter what happens, and so you guys can pencil me in for that.
Sir, voters in Ohio, which has become a pretty red state over the last couple of cycles, voted to enshrine abortion rights into their constitution earlier this week. You, of course, signed the 6-week abortion restriction in your home state. Do you think that that could be a vulnerability with you, or for you, with independent voters or in a general election?
I think these referenda, you know, one, pro-life side has very little money. They get outspent. That was a very radical proposal, and Ohio, I think that, you know, typically would not have embraced that, but I just think that they just got pummeled in the campaign. And so I've said already publicly, pro-life movement, these referenda have been a whitewash, and I think part of it is that it's an uneven playing field. They're not putting money in. You got to campaign. You got to articulate what you believe in. I don't think most people in Ohio actually want to see abortion up till birth. I don't think that they think that minors should have a constitutional right without parent involvement at all. And some of the things that have written that, I mean, it was pretty extreme.
Governor, you and Nikki Haley report that you raised quite a lot of money after the debate. At what point are you going to call, or will you call, for the other candidates to drop out?
Well, look, I mean, people can do what they want. I mean, I think that it's not my responsibility to do that. I do think that the RNC has indicated the next debate is going to be fewer people, maybe 2 or 3. I think that that's good. I think if you're not in the debate, then you shouldn't have to. Then you're not going to really be able to compete. But there's one candidate that has a path to beat Donald Trump, and that's me. You've got to be able to win voters. Yes, there's some that definitely don't want Trump, and you got to be able to win those. But there's some that are willing to vote for Trump. Maybe they're not dyed in the wool on that, but you got to compete in that with those conservative voters, and I'm the only one that can do that. And you see it even in the polls that have Trump up. Underlying that shows we have the highest favorability. We have the highest number of saying that they're going to potentially vote for us or considering to vote for us. And that was before the Kim Reynolds endorsement. You know, these endorsements in politics, you know, a lot of them, you know, are overrated. This one is real because she is revered amongst Republicans in this state for the job that she did. And I would say 99% of people showing up to that caucus are going to have a positive view of Governor Kim Reynolds. And I actually saw after the debate, NBC was doing a focus group, and they had a bunch of Iowa caucus goers potential. There's like, does this endorsement make you more likely to support Governor DeSantis? All of them raised their hand and said yes. So I think that it's a really significant endorsement. I think it shows, it's her signal to Iowa caucus goers, this is a real race. We got to get this one right. And I think you're going to see a lot of good stuff out of us over the next few weeks, leading into December and that next debate. And then I've called publicly, we need to do a debate in Iowa. We should do it. We should partner with local media. We should do one that's going to get reach all throughout this state. That is very, very important. And as much as I like Florida and I like Miami, and I was happy to host it as the sitting governor, Florida is not involved in this for many, many months. Iowa's coming, and then after Iowa, we need to do one in New Hampshire. Those should be done, so I hope that they're going to do that. I would have liked to have seen the December one be in Iowa, but hopefully we do have a couple weeks in early January to have a debate in Iowa. But that needs to be done, and the same thing with New Hampshire. Those are the 2 states in January that are going to vote, and we need to really focus on reaching those voters so that those voters can make a decision. Thanks, guys.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Thanks, Brad.
Head out this way.
We got endorsed by the governor. We're going to have some more good news coming out in the next couple of weeks, which is really, really good. But it's interesting when you're on the ground. A lot of people are not firm in their choices. Even when Trump's, a lot of these people will shift. The number one thing I get when I go out is, you flip me. That's what people say. I don't even ask them who they flip from. I know who they flip from. So I think that there's a recognition that we may need to put a different foot forward. They just want to know that you're a candidate that's going to fight for them, that's going to be strong, that's going to deliver. And then when they see that with me, you know, you do that. But this is all volatile. I've always said New Hampshire is the latest breaking of all the ones. You don't want to be surging in October, November. You want to be surging in January. So we're going to put the work in. We've got a tremendous amount of grassroots support, tremendous amount of support from the legislature here in New Hampshire, because I think a lot of the legislators, one, they've seen what we've done in Florida. They want to see that for the country. But I think they're also sensitive about having somebody at the top of the ticket that's going to be able to perform well, because that could make the difference between New Hampshire keeping the legislature Republican or it flipping Democrat. So for all those reasons, I think we're going to do very, very well. But I was interesting, you know, we were just in Iowa for the family leader thing, and you know, you look at some of those November polls in the past, and I mean, people that won Iowa were like really, really low, and then all of a sudden have done much better.
Quickly, have you clinched the endorsement of Bob Vanderplatz?
I don't know. I mean, he's going to announce that. I think what I saw the reports on Fox on Special Report tonight. I mean, I think that if you saw that family leader forum, clearly his folks there gravitated to me. I don't think there's any question about that. We have a good relationship, and I think that Bob has been somebody that's been very vocal about Donald Trump is not going to be the way forward, not going to be able to get the job done, particularly as a lame duck president. I mean, we want a two-termer, but also we want a candidate that's got a record of actually standing and fighting for people. For example, fighting for school choice, fighting for the rights of parents, fighting against some of the nonsense that we see out there. We have a record in that regard that's been second to none. So we're hopeful that we're able to secure that endorsement. And then if that does happen, to have so many members of the Iowa legislature, to have the governor, then to have Bob and his network, that's going to be a pretty powerful machine, and we're going to turn all that on, or they'll turn it on, and we're going to go there and do that. But I think that these first two states are just going to totally upend the conventional wisdom. One of the things I appreciate about both Iowa and New Hampshire, voters don't like being force-fed what they're supposed to do. I think when the media is saying one thing, I think that they say, well, wait a minute, why is the media telling me that I got to go for this guy and not this guy? And I think they think, well, we're going to look at this even closer now, and I think New Hampshire especially likes to chart its own course. They don't want to follow conventional wisdom, and they certainly don't want to just fall in line behind an establishment candidate who's not going to be able to make any big changes. And that's, I think, true for most of the people that are running against us in the primary. All right, we'll see you guys soon. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Veteran, I like to think that your service in Iraq has probably given you a different frame of reference when you look at the military. How would you distinguish the biggest differences you might have from the current commander-in-chief?
Oh, good grief. How much time do we have? It's a good question. Well, so I think a lot of this started under Obama. I think it continued under Trump. I don't think Trump really supported it, but he didn't really have a good handle on the people that he appointed. And so there was a lot of political agenda put into the military, and then Biden has just put it on steroids, and that's inappropriate. I mean, we don't need social agendas. We don't need woke ideology. We don't need any of that in the military. We need to do one thing: mission first. Focus on the mission. Make sure we're promoting people solely on the basis of merit, and not any other reason. And the thing is the recruiting's at the lowest level it's been since, I think, the end of the Vietnam War. And part of the reason it is, I think, is because when you join the military, you're writing a check payable to the United States of America for an amount up to and including your life. You don't know where they're going to send you. You don't know what contingencies are going to happen. But I think when you do that, you want to know that the civilians and the top military brass are going to make those decisions solely on the basis of how do you accomplish the mission, that they wouldn't divert from the mission in order to advance a political agenda or anything like that. And I don't think a lot of recruits have confidence in that right now. I have veterans that come up to me frequently now say, you know, thank you for your service, but they say they wouldn't want their kid or grandkid to join today's military. And that's a tragedy because this has been a tradition for a lot of families. So on day one as Commander-in-Chief, we're going to take all that out, all the social agenda, all the woke, we're going to rip it out, throw it in the trash can. We're going to focus on mission first. Mission accomplishment. That's all I want out of the military. The other thing I think that would be much different is our posture towards China. I think this administration has been very deferential to China. They're constantly saying China is not an adversary, that it's kind of more of a friendly competition. No, I think China is a threat to this country. And I think we need to get serious about the threat to this country. Like, yes, I understand people in Wall Street have made money in China. I get that. But to me, that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is what's happened over the last couple of decades with China and how has that affected the American people. And it's not been good for this country. They've hollowed out a lot of industrial base of this country. They've gotten wealthy. They've grown their military. People used to say 20, 25 years ago, China would become more democratic if you did things like most favored nation and put them in the World Trade Organization. It's been the opposite. They're more authoritarian than they were 25 years ago, and Xi is very ambitious in terms of what he's doing. But you think about what they did. You have San Francisco. I mean, there's feces on the streets, drugs, all this stuff happening, and this is like squalor. And what Governor Sununu says is exactly right. It is a shell of its former self. But Xi is coming to town, so what did they do? They cleaned the feces off the sidewalk. They cleared the streets. They made it look like it was actually a well-run city. But it was all just a Potemkin village. But they were willing to do that for Xi Jinping, but they're not willing to do that for their own citizens or for the American people. So we're going to take the threat of China seriously. I think the next 10 or 15 years is going to determine whether we remain the dominant power in this country or whether China eclipses us. And this is not just something about, oh, I'm competitive, I want to bang my chest, or number one. Yeah, I do. That is kind of how I'm wired, but it's more fundamental than that. If China is able to dominate the global economy, if they're able to dominate throughout the world, they will export their authoritarian ideology any place they can. The cost of doing business with China will be to bend the knee to their agenda, and it will impact every American family. So we can't let that happen. You got to have enough military strength to deter China's ambitions. You got to have our economy that is decoupled, so we're not dependent on China for all these important things. And you need to get serious about how China wields power over our own society here. In Florida, I banned China from buying land in our state. We got the Confucius Institute out of the year. We need to do that across this whole country. Yes. So the question's about illegal aliens. So Biden has let in almost 8 million. We don't know who these people are. They never went through any checks. We know they've come from Iran. We know they've come from China, Russia, Middle East, as well as Central America. And I think to protect this country, you got to send them back. I don't think you can just sit there and allow this many people. Now, what's going to happen is you do have people that are trying to get in the country legally, and that process is ridiculous. When you stop the invasion at the border, when you implement policies like Remain in Mexico so people don't even want to try to come, when you build a border wall, and oh, by the way, I'll actually build the wall, and I will get Mexico to pay for it. And here's how you do it. I remember that promise, but here's how you do it. The way you, of course, Mexico's just not going to fork over money. The way you do it is you impose fees on remittances that foreign nationals send to their home countries. So they send $100 billion a year to foreign countries. A small fee on those remittances will raise billions of dollars, and we'll build the border wall. So we are going to do that. We're going to get that done. And then we'll also hold the Mexican drug cartels accountable. They are killing tens of thousands of our fellow citizens with the fentanyl. And it is not just these people in San Francisco that are out on the street doing drugs all the time. Obviously, some people are dying for that, and that's sad. But with fentanyl, you'll have people that aren't even addicted to drugs at all. Maybe a college student takes a pill, and it turns out it's laced with fentanyl, and that could be enough to fatally poison them. And you're just seeing this in every community.
So they're invading our country and they're killing our people. President not only has a right, president has a responsibility to fight back. And we're going to treat them as foreign terrorist organizations, and we're going to authorize the use of deadly military force against the drug cartels. So what will happen is, when you solve that problem, and it's just a matter of will, we can do it, you have way more resources so that if somebody, like an American citizen, I believe should be able to bring in a foreign spouse. Like if it's your spouse, you bring them in. And that takes a long time. So you'll be able to see improvements there. But when you have an open border, you're never going to be able to see it. Yes, sir.
Who think we're dumb. We're not going to be lied to and just take it. We're going to stand for the truth. And ultimately, we need truth in this country. So look, I promised I would do the full Grassley. We delivered on the promise. I promised I would do all the big things in Florida that conservatives have wanted to see done for years and years and almost never got done and still haven't got done outside of Iowa, Florida, and maybe a couple other Republican states. And yet we've done that. So whatever I tell you I'm going to do, I don't just say that because I want your vote and then I'm going to forget about it. If I tell you I'm going to do something, I not only intend to do it, I have a plan to be able to get it done. And so what can you expect from me? Kim mentioned, Bob Vanderplatz mentioned, we need a president that can serve 2 full terms. It really is important. If you look, and I've been very frank with, my views on President Trump's campaign, where he's campaigning on things that he promised to do in 2016 and didn't deliver. And he's doing the same promises: build the wall, drain the swamp, special counsel for Democrats, all this stuff. And I've been frank, but I've also acknowledged the good things that were done. And there were a lot of good things that were done. The problem is almost everything good that was done was reversed by Biden on day one. And it's great that we had that, and obviously that was better than a Democrat, what they would have done. But literally, it evaporated with like the stroke of a pen. And that's because one term just isn't enough to get those changes to stick. You got to be able to be someone that can work with the Congress and actually get things in legislation. But you need somebody like President Reagan when he came in, serving 2 terms, and then his legacy far outlasted those 8 years. The Democrats weren't able to reverse what he was doing, and he basically, his philosophy was the dominant philosophy in this country for a quarter of a century. We've got to have a president that can come in and not just be a caretaker for 4 years, but can be a change agent for 8 years that's going to fundamentally put this country on a different path. So I will do that.
We've got a lot of folks that are really working hard for us, and they're saying that things are looking really good for us, particularly on the ground. They don't agree with some of the narratives that are put out, but I think a lot of it is just strong message, strong record, and strong leadership going forward. And we had some great questions here today. I think that they're hitting on all the things that really matter, not only in terms of issues, but also in terms of some of the contrast with some of the other candidates. And we were able to just articulate those in a very honest and frank way. And I think that they want to see people, Iowans want to see people that are going to reflect their conservative values. And when you have candidates that come here, say one thing, then go others and say others, that's a problem. And you can't have 2 of one candidate. You can't have Hawkeye Haley here saying she's conservative, and then more nuanced Nikki appealing to independents and liberals in New Hampshire. That doesn't work. You got to have the same message everywhere. Also, you had the question about Donald Trump and his kind of what's happened with his pro-life stance. Go back and read his March for Life speech in 2020 of January. He's talking very passionately about how every life's a gift from God, how this is a noble movement to protect life. Now he's trashing people like Governor Reynolds who've signed pro-life protections into law. Did he just not mean it then? Or has he changed his tune to now? Is he worried about the political wins? Is this not something that's a matter of principle for him? So I think these voters are identifying a lot of the contrasts, I think, in a really impressive way.
Governor DeSantis, do you think that former President Trump's commitment to the courtroom rather than the campaign trail is hurting him here with Iowa voters?
I don't know about that, but what I have said on all of this is the Democrats would like nothing better than to make 2024 a referendum on Donald Trump, a referendum on all these other issues, and then to avoid scrutiny for their own failures under Joe Biden. And that's true whether it's Biden or somebody else. So I just think it's not going to be something that's going to work well for our party. And you had someone ask about some of this stuff. All of this stuff, to me, is unfortunate, politically motivated, and I've spoken out very critically about all of that. At the same time, this stuff is happening, and it is going to exert, I think, a toll on Republicans' chances going forward. I'm actually the one guy that can deal with all this in the way that's going to make everybody on Republicans happy, because I can come in and clean house on day one without much of a problem. But the reality is the Democrats would like nothing more. They do not want the election to be about their failures. They want the elections to be about other things.
Governor DeSantis, big cost a woman in Texas suing to obtain an emergency abortion in the state. She's carrying a baby with a fatal genetic disorder. It's not expected to survive after being born. The state Supreme Court has blocked her ability to get that emergency abortion, and she wants to have this abortion not just to protect her own life, but her ability to get pregnant in the future. Do you think she should be able to have that abortion?
So I don't know the facts of that. I know Texas has laws that are a little bit different than Florida. The Florida legislature passed a heartbeat protection bill, but they included exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother, victims of human trafficking, and then when you have these situations where you have real significant abnormalities. So that's what Florida did, and that's what I said.
Governor DeSantis,
Two quick questions. One, since you mentioned it today, the president of UPenn resigned after that testimony before Congress about anti-Semitism. Your reaction to that? And then separately, Iowa's Republican caucuses have elected or picked 3 people: Cruz, Huckabee, Santorum, that did not go into win the nomination. Why is Iowa so important to you, and does that at all play a factor in moving forward?
So in terms of the pen, yes, that was absolutely appropriate. The performance of those presidents was absolutely abysmal. And it exposed what a lot of us have been complaining about for a long time, but a real rot in academia. And the fact that you could lose your job at Penn because you take a conservative position on a normal political issue, but yet you wouldn't be penalized for advocating the genocide of Jews. Those two things don't make sense. And when they're trying to justify saying it's okay to support the genocide of Jews because of free speech, first of all, that rings hollow because they don't uphold free speech in areas that conflict with their orthodoxy. So that's that. The second thing in terms of Iowa, look, I think all those races have been different than this one. You've already seen a coalescing of the field. This next debate, if they do, I'm going to show up, but it's only going to be 3 candidates. Trump probably won't show up, even bother showing up. So you may only have 2 candidates then. So I think Iowa's playing a role of catapulting somebody to be in that one-on-one with Donald Trump. And that's why I think it's different. If you didn't have a former president, if you just had 8 candidates and you were doing it, who knows what the implications would be. I think every year is different. But I think in this year, this is the first time people are going to vote, and I think it's going to be something that's going to be really, really significant. And the one thing that I've picked up in every part of this state is Iowans believe that their vote matters. They don't want the media deciding that their vote doesn't matter. And I think that they look at a lot of these narratives like, wait a minute, we're going to make the decisions that we want to do. And I do think you have a lot of voters who are, somewhat, maybe for Trump, but not for sure. And all this is going to come to fruition over these next few weeks. And so I'm excited. I think you guys are going to have a great night to report on a lot of good stuff on January 15th. Thank you all. Appreciate you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate everything. God bless